I'm Caroline Hayes. I'm 34, and for the first time in nearly a decade, I had booked a real vacation just for myself. 2 weeks in Hawaii, no work, no responsibilities, just the ocean and quiet. My flight was early, and I hadn't slept. But I didn't care. I'd made it happen. Every dollar I spent on that trip was earned through years of long shifts and packed lunches. When I opened the door to my apartment that Sunday night, suitcase in hand, sand still in my shoes, I stopped cold. Someone had painted the walls white. My couch was gone. There were strangers carrying a table through my living room, and my sister was giving orders, like she owned the place before I go any further. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and if you've ever come home to something that made your heart drop, go ahead and hit like and subscribe to hear what happened. When I stood my ground, I grew up outside Chicago, the oldest of 2 girls in a family that believed in hard work and quiet gratitude. My parents immigrated here before I was born. They raised us to believe that if you wanted something, you earned it yourself. They didn't care much for birthdays or graduations, but they never missed a chance to remind us that independence was everything. I took that to heart, more than I realized at the time. I put myself through school, worked nights and weekends, and built a life that was mine. From the ground up, I became a licensed physical therapist and landed a full-time job at a rehabilitation center in Boston. The kind of place where the days are long, but the work is meaningful. I was proud of it, even when no one else said it out loud for 6 years. I lived in a tiny studio with no oven and a shower so small, I had to lean sideways just to shave my legs. I skipped takeout, skipped movies, skipped new clothes. I made my own coffee and packed my lunch, and every spare dollar went toward a future I could see, but hadn't yet touched 3 years ago. I made the down payment on a 1-bedroom in a converted brick building near the harbor, not much to look at from the outside, but inside, I made it mine. I painted the walls a warm rust color that caught the afternoon light. I found second-hand furniture that suited me perfectly, and I filled the space slowly with things that made me feel settled. My sister Tara never seemed to understand any of it. She was 4 years younger and always the one who needed rescuing. She switched majors 3 times and jobs twice. That she didn't finish, she called our parents when she needed help, and they always came running. A broken lease, a missed payment, a bad breakup. They never let her fall far. They meant well. I think when I bought the apartment, my mother barely paused before changing the subject to Tara's latest promotion. When I refinished the bedroom dresser, my father said I should have just thrown it out when I mentioned taking a vacation. They looked at each other like I'd lost my mind. So when I finally did book the trip to Hawaii, I told almost no one. Just my boss, my neighbor, and a few close friends. I left a note for Mrs. Fletcher down the hall asking her to water my plants, and I triple-checked every lock window and drawer before leaving. Hawaii was perfect in ways I didn't even know I needed. Warm air, soft light, the sound of waves, and nothing else. I kept my phone on airplane mode for most of the trip, only checking it once or twice when I did. I saw a few odd messages from my mom asking for measurements of my living room and bedroom. She said she was thinking about updating their house, so I sent her what she asked for and went back to the beach on my last night. I sat barefoot in the sand and watched the sky turn pink and gold. I remember thinking maybe I'd finally reached a point in life where I could exhale. The next night, I rolled my suitcase down the hallway to apartment 4B and saw the door propped open with a brick. There were boxes everywhere. The furniture wasn't mine, the art on the walls wasn't mine, and my sister was in my kitchen chatting with movers like she'd been there for weeks. I stood there, unable to speak, and realized this wasn't a prank or a surprise party or some mix-up. They had moved in, and they had done it without telling me. Tara was standing in my kitchen, directing the movers like it was her name on the deed. A tall man with a trimmed beard, Kyle, I assumed, was hauling a box labeled pantry items into what used to be my hallway closet. The walls were no longer terracotta. They were white, stark, sterile white. My couch was gone, the one I'd reupholstered myself. My rug was gone. My bookshelf. The framed photo of Grandma Rose that used to sit by the lamp. Tara turned and smiled like nothing was out of place. "You're back early," she said. Surprise. She walked over and gave me a quick hug before I could step away. "What do you think?" I couldn't speak. I looked around the room. The curtains were sheer, now white, and flimsy, not the thick ones I'd chosen to block out the city lights. There were new throw pillows, a metal coffee table I didn't recognize, and a glossy print on the wall that said, "Good vibes only." "What happened to my things?" I asked, my voice catching. "Oh, don't worry," she said quickly, waving toward a stack of bins near the coat closet. "Most of it's packed up. Mom and Dad helped. We donated the stuff that was, kind of outdated." My heart started to pound. "You donated my furniture." "Just the old stuff," she said, brushing it off. "We needed to make space. Kyle and I brought in a few upgrades." "You'll love it once you settle in." A man's voice called from the bedroom. "Babe, where should I put the monitor?" "Just a sec," she called back. Then she looked at me. "Kyle's been setting up the desk in the bedroom. Hope that's okay." I walked down the hallway and opened the door to my bedroom. The sage green walls were gone, replaced by pale gray. A huge bed with a tufted headboard filled the room. My dresser was gone. My quilt. The writing desk, Grandma Rose, left me gone. There was a white laminate dresser in its place. The floor lamp I'd bought at a flea market had been replaced with a chrome one from a box store. I walked back to the living room. "Where's my desk?" Tara glanced up from her phone. "Oh, Mom took it, said it was a family piece and should stay with her. She's using it in her sewing room." "That desk belonged to Grandma," I said. "She left it to me." "Well, technically, she didn't put it in the will," Tara said. "It's not like it's a crime. You'll still see it. Mom just thought it wasn't being appreciated." I stared at her. "How did you even get in? Mom has your spare key, remember, for emergencies. She let us in so we could get started while you were gone. She thought you'd be thrilled." I couldn't respond. Kyle came out of the bedroom and offered a quick smile. "Hey, I'm Kyle. Good to meet you." He held out his hand. I didn't take it. "Why are you in my apartment?" I asked. He looked at Tara, then back at me. "We've been looking for a place. It's brutal out there. Your mom said this space was underused. It just made sense." Tara stepped forward. "You're never home anyway. You're always working or at the gym. We figured, Mom figured it was the perfect solution. It's not like we're strangers. We're family." I opened the fridge. Everything inside was different. There were new condiments, a fancy brand of oat milk meal prep containers I'd never seen. My calendar had been removed from the door. In its place were photos of Tara and Kyle posing on my balcony, standing in my kitchen, grinning beside the living room window. My name wasn't on a single thing. "This isn't a shared space," I said. "I didn't agree to this." Tara let out a frustrated sigh. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's just temporary. A few months, maybe a year. We'll contribute to groceries and bills. And where am I supposed to sleep?" She walked over to the couch and pulled a strap. It unfolded into a thin pull-out bed. "It's actually pretty comfy," she said. "Memory foam? Top of the line?" I didn't answer. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "We're on our way. Can't wait to see your face. Champagne's chilling." Tara glanced at my screen. "Perfect. They'll explain everything. You'll see it's really a win-win." I stared at the movers who were now unboxing a juicer and placing it beside a sleek espresso machine on the kitchen counter. One of them asked where to hang a mirror. Tara pointed toward the entryway. The mirror had belonged to my great-aunt. It used to hang above the dresser in my bedroom. "This is theft," I said louder now. You can't just come in here and change everything. You gave Mom the key, Tara shot back. That's not theft. I gave her the key for emergencies, not for redecorating. My hand shook. I opened my contacts and tapped on the emergency dial option. You're calling the police? Tara's voice cracked. Are you serious? Get out, I said. She stared at me. What's wrong with you? We thought you'd be happy. I looked at Kyle, then back at her. This is my home. You had no right. The front door opened and in walked my parents. My dad held a bottle of champagne. My mom carried a small gift bag. Surprised she called, but the smile on her face faded when she saw me phone in hand standing in the middle of the room. What's going on? My mother asked. Why are you back so soon? My dad set the bottle on the counter. We wanted everything to be perfect before you got here. I pointed toward the couch. This is your idea of perfect. My mom stepped forward. We just wanted to help Tara and Kyle. You're always alone, Caroline. This way you'll have company. I didn't ask for company, I said. My father crossed his arms. You have all this space and no one to share it with. It's wasteful. I bought this place, I said quietly. Every penny of it. This isn't about space, it's about respect. You're blowing this out of proportion, my mother said. You're always so independent. We thought you wouldn't mind. You didn't ask. Tara was crying now, sitting on the couch. You've changed, she said. You used to be generous. Hawaii made you cold. I looked around the room, at the movers, at the champagne, at the new couch and white walls and unfamiliar appliances. Then I looked at her. No, I just stopped pretending this was okay. My father's face darkened. This isn't over. I stepped toward the door. You have 15 minutes to start packing up. I'll be back then. Tara stood. Where are we supposed to go? You have each other, I said. Figure it out. And I walked out, closing the door behind me, not knowing what would be left when I came back. But certain, it was the first time in my life I hadn't backed down. When I came back 20 minutes later, the movers were hauling the last few boxes out. Kyle stood by the front door, arms crossed, his expression blank. Tara was curled up on the edge of the couch, my couch now placed awkwardly in the center of the room, wiping at her face. My mother sat beside her, rubbing her back in small circles, while my father stood by the window, jaw clenched tight. The apartment was quieter, but the tension hadn't gone anywhere. Thank you for listening, I said to no one in particular. No one answered. My father finally turned around. This isn't finished, Caroline. You're making a mistake. His voice was calm but cold. Tara and Kyle had plans for this place. Good plans. I'm sure they did, I said, but those plans should have been for their own home. My mother gave me a long, disappointed look. We're supposed to help each other. That's what family does. Helping and taking over aren't the same thing, I said. Kyle stayed silent as the last of the movers filed out, one of them giving me a small nod on the way. I stepped aside to let them through, then turned back toward the group. I'm not staying here tonight, I said. I'm going to Jenna's. By tomorrow I want everything that was removed returned. Furniture, dishes, Grandma's desk. My father muttered something under his breath. Might not be possible, he said louder. Some of it's already been donated. My stomach dropped. Donated? Your mother called in a favor. The place had a pickup scheduled. I looked over at the storage bins stacked near the door. Labeled in my mother's handwriting, Amanda's things. I walked to the nearest one and popped the lid. Books tossed in sideways. Bent covers. Pages folded. A few photo frames, some cracked. knickknacks packed carelessly with newspaper that had already torn. I opened another, a stack of folded sweaters mashed under 2 cast-iron pans. A small jewelry box with its lid off and contents scattered loose. "They didn't care?" Jenna said behind me. I hadn't even heard her come in. She looked around the apartment slowly. "They didn't even try." I didn't answer. I stood for a long moment, then closed the lid and stepped back. "I need to know where the desk is," I said. My mother looked up from where she sat. "It's in my sewing room." "It's safe. It doesn't belong to you. It was your grandmother's. She gave it to me." "It wasn't in the will," she said softly. "We just assumed. It's not a matter of assumption. It was mine." She looked down. Tara didn't say anything. Kyle had already slipped out into the hallway. I left a few minutes later with Jenna. The moment we stepped outside, I felt the night air wrap around me. We didn't speak until we reached her building. She offered me a clean set of pajamas and a glass of wine, and I sat on her futon with my knees pulled up my suitcase unopened in the corner. "I keep thinking it'll make sense," I said after a while. "That maybe I missed something. Maybe I didn't explain things clearly enough." Jenna shook her head. They knew exactly what they were doing. I didn't respond. I checked my phone. More messages. My mother. "We can fix this." My father. "Don't throw away your family." Tara. "You've changed." I silenced the phone and set it face down on the table. The next morning, Jenna came with me back to the apartment. The moving truck was gone. The bins were still stacked where I left them. The couch was there, but turned the wrong way. The dining chairs were missing. The bookshelf stood empty. The walls were still white. In the kitchen, the fridge was nearly bare. The calendar was gone. The magnet from my trip to Maine was nowhere to be found. Half my pots were missing. My good knife set, the heavy pan I'd used for years. In the bedroom, the bed was back in place, but the linens were gone. My dresser drawers were mostly empty. A lamp was missing. My quilt wasn't there. In the living room, I counted the bins. 6 of them, for an entire apartment. Jenna crouched near one of the open boxes. They tossed everything in like it was junk. I stood by the window and stared out toward the harbor. "I need to write it all down," I said. "Everything that's gone." So we made a list. We went room by room. Every item we could remember. Every missing thing. I pulled out receipts when I had them. Pictures on my phone helped. The list grew longer by the hour, and still no sign of the desk. I called my mother again. "Where's the desk I told you? It's in my sewing room. I want it back." There was a pause. "We'll talk about that later. Right now your sister and Kyle are in a hotel, and it's not cheap. Maybe you could reconsider your position. I'm not discussing anything until the desk is back in my apartment." She didn't reply. I hung up. That afternoon, friends started arriving. Jenna had told them. Co-workers mostly. They brought grocery bags, small boxes, things they thought might help. Maria brought cookware she didn't use anymore. Tom had an extra coffee table. Someone else brought a few throw pillows and 2 floor lamps. We unpacked everything together. We swept and wiped down the counters. We set up what we could. While we were organizing the bookshelf, Maria paused. "If one of your patients told you this story, what would you say I didn't answer right away?" "You'd say they were being taken advantage of," she said. "That someone crossed a line. That they should protect themselves." I looked over at her and nodded once. That night, when the apartment was quiet again, I searched for property attorneys in Boston. The first one on the list had a free consultation. I filled out the form and sent it in before I could talk myself out of it. The next day they called. Lauren Porter's office was downtown. Her assistant offered me an appointment that afternoon. The lobby was bright full of glass and clean lines. When Lauren came out to greet me, she didn't look like what I expected. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, but kind. We sat in her office, and I told her everything. When I finished, she closed her notebook. "They had no legal right to do any of this," she said. "It doesn't matter that you're related. I'm not trying to punish them," I said. "I just want my things back. I want it to stop." She nodded. "We'll start with a demand letter. Outline the damages, request the return of property, and note your legal rights. That often gets results. If not, we'll file a civil claim." She paused, and the desk I asked. "We'll request its return. If they don't comply, we'll escalate." By the time I got home, there was a voicemail from my father. I played it once. Then again. "You're tearing this family apart over paint and a few old chairs," he said. "You were raised better than this." I stood in the hallway, holding my phone, and listened to the silence when it ended. Then I called Lauren back and told her to send the letter. The letter went out on a Tuesday morning. Lauren had it hand-delivered and emailed to both my parents and Tara. That afternoon, my phone started buzzing again. I didn't pick up the first time or the second. Around 6, I stepped outside to check the mail and saw that I had 5 missed calls. 3 from my mother, 1 from my father, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I played the voicemail later that night, standing barefoot in my half-furnished kitchen, staring at the empty space where my dining table used to be. My mother's voice was quiet, tearful. "Caroline, why would you do this? Lawyers, we're your family. We can talk this through." The second voicemail came just 10 minutes later. This time, it was my father. "This ends now. You don't threaten your parents. You fix this. Immediately." By the time I went to bed, Tara had posted something on social media. I didn't follow her anymore, but Jenna saw it. A blurry picture of an unpacked hotel room with the caption, "It's hard when people who are supposed to love you turn their back when you need them most." There were comments from cousins, friends from high school. Messages like, "Hang in there, and you deserve better." No one mentioned my name, but it didn't need to be spelled out. The next morning, my Aunt Catherine called. "Your mother is beside herself," she said. "Tara has nowhere to go, and you're dragging this into court over a few missing dishes. You were raised better than this." I didn't explain. I didn't defend. I just thanked her for calling and hung up. But then later that day, I got a message from my cousin Patrick. "Good for you," it said. Someone finally said no to Aunt Helen's favorite. I set my phone down and left it in my desk drawer at work for the rest of the day. At home, the apartment was slowly coming back together. The bookshelf was half full now, thanks to donations, and a few replacements I'd ordered online. Maria brought over a second lamp. Jenna hung up a framed print she'd found at a vintage store. A coworker dropped off an extra saucepan. Every night, I added something back in. It wasn't the same, but it helped. Lauren had told me to keep records, so I did. I took pictures of the empty spaces where my furniture used to be. I made a spreadsheet of what was still missing and what I'd replaced. I saved every message, every voicemail. I wrote down every call. One evening, after a long day at the clinic, I was organizing the hallway closet when Jenna dropped by with takeout. We sat on the floor and ate straight from the containers. At one point, she asked, "If one of your patients described all this, what would you tell them I didn't answer right away?" I mean, if someone said their family entered their home without permission, removed their things, changed the locks, moved someone else in, what would you call it? I looked across the room at the empty corner where Grandma's desk used to sit. "I'd tell them to set boundaries," I said finally, "to protect themselves." She nodded. "Exactly." The next morning, I sent Lauren a message asking about next steps. She called back within the hour. "Let's move forward," she said. "We'll request an emergency hearing for the return of property." And I'll include a formal notice preventing Tara and Kyle from entering the apartment without written permission. It's precautionary, but it establishes your rights. Later that week, I ran into someone in the parking lot outside the clinic. I didn't recognize her at first. She wore sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. When she stopped me, she introduced herself. "I'm Megan," she said. "I used to live with Tara. We were roommates 2 years ago." I nodded slowly. I saw some of her posts. I just wanted to say, "I believe you." I waited. She did something similar to me, Megan said. Started small, using my room for filming, moving her stuff into my side of the closet. Then she had her boyfriend over so often it was like he lived there. She made it hard for me to speak up. And when I finally said something, she told everyone I was overreacting. I didn't say anything. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a business card. "If you ever need someone to confirm that she has a pattern, I'm happy to help." I thanked her and passed her contact to Lauren that afternoon. The next day, Lauren filed the eviction notice. "They aren't living there now," she explained, "but this legally reinforces that they don't have a right to return." She also filed for a restraining order, just in case. "It may seem extreme," she said, "but we've seen situations like this before. They think family means exceptions." By that evening, the paperwork had been served. Tara and Kyle were staying at a hotel on the south side of the city. By 10 o'clock, my phone lit up again. Kyle, this time. A restraining order. "Are you serious? You've completely overreacted. We're family." This could have been a conversation. I didn't reply. Lauren had told me not to engage. She said every message like that helped our case. Later that night, I got one final text from my father. It was short. "I don't know what we did wrong raising you. Your sister needed help, and instead of showing compassion, you brought lawyers into it. Property can be replaced. Family is forever." I read it twice, then turned my phone off and left it on the windowsill. The apartment was quiet. The walls were still white, but the space felt different. I'd repainted the living room over the weekend. Not the same terracotta I'd loved before, but a warm, golden yellow that made the room glow in late afternoon. I stood by the bookshelf and traced the spines with my finger. The couch was new. A different shape, but comfortable. The rug was soft underfoot. The curtains were back up the ones I'd saved in storage, thick enough to block out the early morning glare. A small, succulent Jenna had given me sat on the windowsill. I opened a window and let the air drift in. The desk wasn't back yet, but the space for it was ready. I'd cleared it days ago. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Lauren had promised to walk me through every step. That night before bed, I folded the restraining order into a file and set it on the counter near the door. Whatever happened next, I was ready for it. The morning after we filed the restraining order, I woke to sunlight pouring through the window and the sound of a delivery truck idling down the street. I got up, made coffee, and sat at the small table by the window, one of the newer pieces donated by a coworker whose daughter had just moved to college. The table wasn't much, but it fit the space better than the one that had been taken. As I stirred cream into my mug, I noticed a padded envelope tucked into the mail slot on the door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, short, from Tara and Kyle's lawyer. They disputed the claims, claimed there had been implied consent due to ongoing communication with my mother about measurements. They stated the entry was not illegal, that the changes were cosmetic, and that the desk, a supposed point of contention, had never formally been assigned to me. They included photos of the apartment as it had appeared after the redesign, captioned "Upgrades generously provided by family." I set the paper down and didn't touch it again for the rest of the day. When Lauren saw the letter, she sighed. "They're trying to reframe the narrative, but it doesn't hold. They're saying, 'I consented.' Implied consent doesn't override legal ownership. What about the desk? They're saying it wasn't yours." I leaned back in the chair across from her. "Do you still have the letter your grandmother wrote?" It was inside the desk. Bottom drawer. Tucked under the lining. Then we need to recover that desk before the letter disappears. I'm filing for an emergency property order today. That afternoon, while I was locking up at work, I saw a familiar car pulling into the lot. A red hatchback parked 2 rows down. Megan stepped out and walked over. She looked different than the last time, calmer, more certain. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a typed statement detailing her experiences as Tara's former roommate. She'd included dates, photos, and a short handwritten note offering to speak on my behalf if needed. "She used to use my room for filming when I wasn't home," Megan said quietly. "Moved my stuff into a bin and said it was temporary." "Sound familiar?" I nodded. "She told people I kicked her out for no reason. Even had some of our friends believing it." She looked toward the sidewalk. "I let it go at the time, but I shouldn't have. So if you need anything from me, you've got it." I thanked her, and we stood in silence for a moment before she walked back to her car. Later that evening, Lauren submitted the emergency request for the desk and filed the formal eviction notice, even though Tara and Kyle were no longer in the apartment. "They haven't returned," I said. "Not since the day I asked them to leave." "Good," she replied. "But this paperwork ensures they can't. Not without consequences." That same night, the paperwork was served to the hotel where they were staying. I didn't hear from Kyle, but Tara posted again. Jenna saw it first. "Some people will go to any length to make themselves the victim, even when you've only ever tried to help them." There were more vague comments, more likes. One relative from my father's side reposted it with a note, "Family matters shouldn't be handled with threats." I didn't respond. I closed the app and slid my phone back into the drawer. The next morning, Lauren called. "We have a court date," she said. "Next Thursday. They're contesting everything, so we'll need to prepare. Bring any documentation you have, photos, receipts, messages. I've already gathered witness statements from your neighbors and your coworkers." I added Megan's letter to the folder. That evening after dinner, I walked around the apartment taking photos of everything. The corner where the desk used to sit. The space near the door where the mirror once hung. The bedroom wall where the quilt had been displayed. I cataloged what had been returned and what hadn't. I took a fresh inventory of the storage bins. Most were still half filled with mismatched items. A pair of slippers, a chipped mug, a lamp base with no shade. I made notes on everything. By Saturday morning, the apartment looked almost like a home again. The living room was simple but warm. The new couch was smaller, but it fit the space better. The bookshelf was fuller. The curtains were closed against the afternoon light. A coworker had dropped off a second-hand sideboard. I filled it with the remaining dishware I'd been able to replace. That afternoon, I visited the donation center down near Dorchester. It was the same one my parents had used. I brought the list with me and handed it to the staff at the front desk. They remembered the donation, said some items had already been sold or reprocessed, but a few things were still on site. I walked through the aisles, scanning for anything familiar. Near the back, I found the mirror. The same brass frame. A small chip on the bottom corner. I purchased it on the spot and loaded it into the back seat of my car. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sunday was quiet. I spent most of it repainting the bedroom. The pale gray that Tara had chosen was too cold. I went with a soft blue, calming, clean. When the walls were dry, I moved the bed back to its original position and hung the mirror above the dresser. I took a picture and sent it to Lauren. "Another item recovered," I wrote. She replied an hour later. "Judge Winters has been assigned to the case. She's fair, firm, takes property rights seriously. We'll be ready." That night, I stood in the center of the living room and looked around. It wasn't perfect. Not yet. But it was mine again. Room by room, piece by piece, I'd taken it back. The court date was 4 days away. And whatever happened, I knew exactly where I stood. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls worn carpet rows of benches that creaked when people shifted their weight. I sat at the front with Lauren, her files stacked neatly beside her. She wore a navy suit and a quiet kind of calm that helped settle my nerves. Across the aisle, Tara and Kyle sat behind their attorney, a young man with a gelled part and a briefcase that looked too new. Tara wouldn't meet my eyes. Kyle stared straight ahead. Judge Winters entered promptly at 9. She was older, gray hair, pulled back tight, no-nonsense expression. She took her seat and began without delay. First came introductions, then a brief review of the case. Lauren stood and delivered our opening documented ownership of the apartment proof of entry without consent, photographic evidence of altered property. She spoke clearly, confidently. She passed up our exhibits one by one, emails, receipts, photos, Megan's statement, the list from the donation center. Then it was their turn. Kyle's lawyer argued that Tara had believed I was giving up the apartment, that her mother had mentioned something about me starting fresh. He claimed Tara had paid for the renovations, handled logistics, and assumed she had my blessing. He called it a misunderstanding between close family members. Judge Winters held up a photo of my old living room. This was submitted as Exhibit C. It shows the former state of the apartment. Can you confirm, Ms. Hayes, that this was taken prior to the alleged incident? Yes, Your Honor, I replied. And you purchased all the furniture shown? Yes. Over time. Some was gifted, some secondhand. She nodded. And the desk. It belonged to my grandmother. It was given to me after her passing. The judge turned to Kyle's lawyer. And this desk you claim was never officially the property of Miss Hayes? He hesitated. There was no formal documentation. She had it in her home for how many years? 6, Your Honor. Judge Winters scribbled something in her notes. Then she called a recess for lunch. Outside, we sat on a bench near the steps. Lauren reviewed a few more pages, made a call, then closed her folder. She sees through it, she said. They're clinging to the idea of confusion. But the paperwork's solid. Do you think they'll speak? I doubt it. Their lawyer's trying to keep them quiet. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Winters called Megan as a witness. She stepped up calm and direct. She told the court about her time living with Tara, how Tara had moved her things without asking, claimed shared spaces, reframed the story when Megan moved out. She explained how she recognized the same pattern happening again. Tara shifted in her seat but said nothing. Then came the part I hadn't expected. The judge asked if Tara had anything she wished to clarify. For the first time, she stood. I thought she didn't want it anymore, she said. Her voice was quiet. She was always gone. She never invited us over. And Mom said she might be moving. Lauren stood. Did Ms. Hayes ever give you verbal or written consent to take over the apartment? No. Did she ask you to paint the walls or donate her belongings? No. Did she tell you she was giving you the apartment? No. Tara sat down again. Her face was blank. The judge reviewed the final set of exhibits. The text messages, the dated photos, the restraining order, the donation records. She asked me one last question. Ms. Hayes, what was the first thing you noticed when you came home that night? I paused. The walls, I said. They were white. And how did that make you feel? I glanced down at my hands, then back up. Like I didn't exist. She gave a small nod. Thank you. She called both legal teams to the front and asked us to remain seated while she reviewed the record. It took 20 minutes. No one spoke. When she returned, she ruled in my favor. Full restitution of property, return of all remaining items or financial compensation equal to documented value. A permanent no-contact order with stipulations for third-party communication if necessary. And a court filing added to their record unlawful occupancy and property interference. She banged the gavel once, then stood. Case closed. Lauren exhaled. I stayed seated for a moment, unsure what to do next. Tara and Kyle walked out without a word. Outside, the air was cooler than it had been that morning. Lauren handed me a final copy of the ruling. "I'll coordinate with the donation center," she said. "They're holding the desk. Do you think she thought she'd get away with it?" "She's gotten away with a lot before." We stood there for a minute in silence. That evening, I returned to the apartment and opened every window. I vacuumed the living room, reorganized the kitchen drawers, wiped down every surface. Then I sat in the chair by the window and folded the court ruling into my records folder. The next morning, I picked up the desk. It was scratched. One leg was chipped. The bottom drawer stuck a little. But when I pulled it open, I found the letter still there, pressed flat under the drawer lining. The handwriting was faded, but the words were intact. I read it once, then again. Then I slid it back into place and closed the drawer. The apartment was mine, and no one would take it from me again. The letter was still there, just as I remembered it. Pressed beneath the drawer, lining edges curled from age, the paper thin and almost translucent in the light. I didn't take it out again. I didn't need to. I knew what it said. I closed the drawer gently and ran my fingers along the grooves of the desk, tracing the places where time had left its mark. For the first time in a long while, the apartment felt quiet in a way that wasn't empty. Over the next few days, I took things slowly. I filled the kitchen with groceries I actually liked, rearranged the bookshelf, found my old quilt in a storage box that had somehow survived the donation sweep. I fixed the sticking window in the bedroom, replaced the bent curtain rod in the hallway. There was a peace in doing those small things, in putting the place back together with my own two hands. Jenna stopped by one afternoon with a small potted plant. "It's a spider plant," she said, setting it on the windowsill. "Good for air. Also hard to kill." I smiled. "Perfect for me." She looked around. "It's starting to feel like you again." "It is." She hesitated at the door. "I ran into your sister downstairs yesterday. She didn't say much. I'm not surprised." She looked off. Not angry, just smaller. I nodded but didn't reply. The following week, Lauren emailed the final closure documents. The restitution check had been processed. The no-contact order confirmed. She included a note about legal storage for the court photos if I wanted to keep them on file. I replied with a short thank you and requested digital copies. I didn't want the physical reminders in my home. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Handwritten. I opened it slowly. It was from my mother. She wrote that she hadn't known the extent of what Tara and Kyle had done, that she had heard things secondhand and assumed it was just a mix-up. She said she never imagined Tara would take over the place without asking, that she was sorry, that she hoped someday we could all be in the same room again like before. There was no apology for what she'd said to me in the past, no mention of the birthday brunch I'd never been invited to, no acknowledgement of what had been taken. Just that hope for a return to something that had never really existed. I folded the letter once, set it aside, and brewed a fresh cup of tea. I didn't reply. Instead, I went back to the living room and sat at the desk. I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and started drafting a letter of my own, not to send, but to write what I needed to say. I listed every item I'd replaced, every hour I'd spent repairing what they had undone. I wrote about what it felt like to walk into my home and not recognize it, what it took to stand in that courtroom and claim it back. I wrote until the page was full, and then I folded it in half and tucked it into the drawer with the first letter. 2 stories side by side. One taken, one reclaimed. Later that week, Megan invited me to a small gathering at her new place. Just a few friends, casual. She said Jenna would be there too, and a few people from the community garden she'd joined. I almost said no, I wasn't ready to be around strangers, but something in her voice made me pause. "You should come," she said. "You don't have to stay long. Just come see what peaceful looks like." So I went. Her apartment was small, but full of life. Art on the walls, mismatched chairs, a record player humming in the corner. People introduced themselves without asking too many questions. Someone handed me a glass of ginger lemonade. Jenna waved from the kitchen. Megan caught my eye across the room and smiled. I didn't say much that night, but I listened. I sat in a room full of people who didn't know. My history didn't expect anything from me and didn't have any version of me to compare myself to. It was strange, and it was good. When I got home, the apartment felt warm. Not just in temperature, but like it was holding something again. I flipped off the hallway light and stood for a moment in the quiet. Whatever came next, I wasn't going back. A few weeks later, I walked the length of the apartment, slowly barefoot, carrying a mug of warm tea. The floor no longer creaked under uneven boards. I'd fixed that. The old bookshelf, the one my dad helped me move in all those years ago, stood firm again in the corner. A soft breeze moved the curtains Jenna helped me rehang. The air smelled faintly of citrus and eucalyptus from the new diffuser I'd picked up at the co-op downtown. The apartment was mine again. Not just legally, not just on paper, but in spirit, in memory, in peace. I'd painted the bedroom a soft, dusty green and found my grandmother's embroidered pillowcases in a box Kyle had stuffed in the back of the coat closet. They smelled like cedar and faint perfume. I washed them carefully, let them dry in the sun, and laid them over fresh sheets. That first night, sleeping in my own bed again, without worry or intrusion, I felt something deep inside me exhale. Tara never reached out. Not a call, not a message. Kyle didn't either, and I stopped checking for them. Lauren closed out the case file before the month ended. The building manager updated my lease. I even got a quiet note from the OA president welcoming me back and asking if I'd like to rejoin the newsletter committee. I politely declined, but smiled when I folded the letter and set it by the fridge. One Saturday morning, I heard a soft knock at my door. It was Megan holding a bundle of mail that had been mistakenly delivered to her unit. "These have your name," she said. "Some of them look like magazines you used to get." I took the stack and flipped through them. Old favorites I hadn't changed the address on. One had my name misspelled, Tara's handwriting scrawled on a sticky note still stuck to the cover. I tossed that one in the recycling bin. That afternoon, Jenna and I sat on the porch with iced tea and a crossword. She pointed out the chipped railing and said she had a friend who could fix it for cheap. "Let's wait," I told her. "I kind of like it. For now." She nodded. "You doing okay?" I looked out across the street. The trees were starting to turn. It would be fall soon. "I am," I said. Better than I thought I'd be. We didn't say much after that. Some scars don't show up right away. They settle in slow like dust in corners. But I'd learned how to sweep them out, bit by bit. No grand gesture, no final confrontation. Just a steady reclaiming of space, of self. And I think that's what justice looks like sometimes. Not in courtrooms or confrontations, but in quiet mornings with clean sheets. In a front door, you lock and unlock yourself. In tea made just the way you like it, with no one else's hand rearranging the cupboard. For anyone listening who's ever had something taken from them, your space, your voice, your place at the table, just know this. It's not gone forever. It may take time. It may take help. It may take a strength you forgot you had. But you can rebuild what they tried to erase. And when you do, it'll be yours in a way it never was before. Thanks for sitting with me through this. If any part of my story reminded you of something in your own life, I'd be honored if you shared it. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe or follow along. There's always room here for more stories of strength.